Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we continue our series with the statewide candidates, Attorney General, Auditor General, and State Treasurer. Today, my special guest is Eugene DePasquale. He's a State House member running for Auditor General. And then Dave Patti from the Pennsylvania Business Council will be here. We're going to talk with Dave a little bit about a new survey they have dealing with some education issues. And guess what? All things political. Guess what? We'll be back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Eugene DePasquale. He's sitting right across from me. He's been on the show before. He's a State House member. He's seeking the Auditor General's post. Representative, thanks for being here.
Terry, thanks for having me on again.
All right, here we go. We're going to have you on. I'm going to do two segments. I want to, first of all, talk about why you want to run for this office, why you think it's important for the voters of this state to elect you. And then I want to talk about, specifically the agenda.
Right.
What is it that you would do?
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, for starters, I think Pennsylvania needs someone who's a tough, fair, independent watchdog to find wasteful spending and also make sure our programs are running efficiently and effectively. And that's why I'm running. I think my background is being the first legislator to put my expenses online, have the lowest expense of any legislator in the state, refusing pay raises, and also at the same time helping rewrite the state's open records law to make sure FIA and the legislature were included. That is the type of background I think is what people are craving right now, which is more transparency, finding wasteful spending, but also making sure our programs are running efficiently and effectively.
Well, the current Auditor General, by the way, I'm unabashed about this. I'm a neutral, but everybody I know thinks Jack Wagner has done a great job, a wonderful job, regardless of party.
Correct.
He says if there's waste and inefficiency, he's tried to expose that. Is there something about what Jack Wagner has done? I'm not using him necessarily as a model. We've had pretty good AGs over the years. I think you would agree.
Oh, absolutely.
What areas do you think that Wagner has particularly gotten into that you think a Eugene DePasquale administration would continue? And then we'll talk about what you might do a little differently.
Well, two things on that. One, Jack Wagner just endorsed me this week, and I was honored to get his endorsement because I think Jack is someone, even though he is a Democrat, I think he is respected on both sides of the aisle.
And Republicans have praised him by it.
Absolutely. So that's number one. Number two, certainly the way he was conducting audits of the school districts and also the charter schools, making sure that we're getting everything that we're supposed to get from our tax dollars. And, even recently, exposing a wasteful spending in York when it came to how computers were purchased through a federal grant program. That is the type of thing that I will certainly continue on, as well as what he has done in other areas. I think, again, you take FIA, which now has mostly been
Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance. We all use these acronyms. Right. We fall into the acronym.
Yeah, we do that. But what he did with that money, making sure that there was abuse at the board level, people taking trips, not making sure that money was supposed to go into student loan programs. That's the type of tenaciousness that I hope to carry on and will carry on if I'm elected Auditor General.
Well, one of the other considerations, I think, is that you're a member of the House, is that the legislature often wants to set itself apart from a lot of audits and I don't know what other areas of state government are sort of set apart. Maybe the courts and the legislature. Just in general, without getting into the specific, we don't need to do that. Do you think that there ought to be more oversight of other institutions, perhaps?
Well, I think you can never have too much transparency. That's number one. One area that is still exempt from the state's open record are our state-related universities. Pitt, Penn State, Temple, Lincoln University.
And there's a big battle that's come up recently because of the
and it's actually my legislation would remove their exemption from the state's right to know law. Again, this is something, look, in full disclosure, my wife and I are saving for our kids. We're targeting Pitt and Penn State for our kids. But in the same token, when you're getting that much taxpayer money, you should have more transparency.
Yeah, for many years, I was a professor at Millersville University, and I think as a state-owned university, we're covered by that.
Correct, absolutely.
Now, so we know, we don't want to upset folks needlessly here, but you're not talking about personnel matters. You're not talking about Go ahead.
How the taxpayer dollars are spent. Yeah. This is making sure that the taxpayers know how their taxpayer dollars are being spent. It's really that simple. And again, prior to 2006, the legislature was exempt. Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency was exempt. I mean, and as we've seen since then, I think the legislature, while still not perfect, again, FIA, while still not perfect, I think you have more transparency now, which has helped eliminate some of the wasteful spending.
Right. So I'm going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to specifically ask you to talk about 3 or 4 areas.
Right.
It seems to me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that every Auditor General, look, you're auditing everything, it's your responsibility,
right.
but there's always a couple of areas that are more prone to audits, basically because A, they spend a lot of money, and B, the impact that the dollars have is truly important. Think about that for a minute. We'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're talking with Representative Eugene DePasquale. He's a candidate for Auditor General. As I indicated earlier, there are 3 or 4 areas that, education is what? Huge part of the state budget. Used to be the largest, I think, maybe Medicaid is now. You would know that more than I would. Medicaid, education. Talk about what a Eugene DePasquale administration would look like in particular.
I said on day one I would order a performance audit of all of our water protection programs to make sure the Marcellus shale drilling isn't negatively impacting our drinking water. That's number 1. Number 2, we have a whole slew of job creation programs in the state through the Department of Community and Economic Development. We need to find out which ones are working for the taxpayers and which ones aren't. The ones that aren't working, we either need to refine them or get rid of them. And the ones that are working, obviously continue that investment because job creation.
Is that ever? I don't recall that ever having been done.
It's been done in specific areas. Auditor General Jack Wagner certainly looked at the capital budget program.
Right.
So it's been done in bits and pieces. I think it has to be looked at comprehensively.
And your point, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, would be we had this massive spending over the last decade on community economic development projects. Maybe something like as much as $4 billion. We're paying $1 billion in interest almost to pay for that, right? So your point would be that so much money we need to find out.
Yeah, well, let's find out which parts of that worked, which parts didn't. So, look, obviously when you spend that much money, and that's roughly what we spent. It's a little off, but roughly what we spend. Some of that probably did help attract some companies, keep some companies, improved infrastructure. But we're obviously going to find some areas where it didn't work. Let's find out why that happened in each area so we can improve upon going forward. And also when it comes to education, we've seen in the last 2 years now test scores dropping across the state. We need to get into the weeds on that. We need to find out, was it the cuts at the state level that impact it? I assume that's part of it, but also what other issues are driving it? Are there kids going to school that are hungry? We may need to improve, food nutrition program for kids, et cetera. So those are the 3 areas that I've said that I would focus on.
Okay. In terms of your relationship with other public officials, one of the things that's always impressed me is that regardless of the party who held the governorship or the leadership in the legislature, most Auditor Generals have been pretty tough. They don't care about political party. What assurances would you give the voters of the state that you don't care who's governor, you don't care?
Well, 2
you
parts.
have a record of being pretty independent.
One, I'd say 3 things. One, just look at my record. I have a track record of being independent. This past budget season, I worked with Republican leader Dave Reed on passing legislation in the House to get rid of the Delaware loophole while lowering the state's corporate net income tax rate. So that shows a track record, and also being the first legislator to put my expenses online. That was not popular inside the Capitol Dome. That I can guarantee you. 2, right now, I actually have a relatively easy argument to make, and that is Republicans control everything in Harrisburg. And as a Democrat, obviously, it's very easy to claim being independent of that. 3rd and finally, though, if I'm Auditor General, we're going to have a governor's election in 2014, and I'm making it very clear that regardless of who were to win that election and beyond, I would be a tough, fair, independent watchdog no matter who it is. I think that our previous Auditor Generals have set the standard. I think, on independents, right? Whether it was Barbara Hafer, Republican, Bob Casey and Jack Wagner, Democrats, neither one of them were ever accused of being in the governor's hip pocket.
And I think maybe with one exception, we did have one Auditor General that got himself into some legal difficulty in the past.
But before them, it was certainly before Barbara Hafer.
No, that's true. Yeah, I'm talking in the 80s. But the point is that I've been impressed. I have actually been impressed, and I've been also fairly critical sometimes of the functioning of the legislature and other things in Harrisburg, that the AG's office has been relatively independent and would absolutely go out and criticize. When they found a problem, it didn't matter who was governor, right?
And that's why we elected, and you don't have a governor or the legislature appoint the Auditor General.
And you're elected in a different cycle than governor, which makes sense, right?
Right. You don't want to have somebody coming in with a wave of a governor or something similar to that.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on the program. Good luck. And coming up, we have Dave Patti from the Pennsylvania Business Council. We'll see if I can get Dave to give us some little inside information about what might happen. What might happen, I'll get that out right on Election Day. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Dave Patti from the Pennsylvania Business Council. He's the president and CEO. We're going to the Business Council conducted a survey, or had conducted for them, an education poll that deals with Common Core standards. I know it's something a lot of people are interested in. Before I do that, David also follows Pennsylvania elections pretty carefully. All right, we're now down, as this airs, to what, 8, 9, 10 days, depending on the markets. You looking for any big surprises out there, or is it you have the answer? What's going on?
Well, actually, I have all the results already in my BlackBerry, but I promise not to share them.
That's okay.
Maybe the first surprise for Pennsylvania is how few surprises I think there's going to be. That we're fairly stable this year. That for the most part, incumbents will do well. Obviously, I think all eyes at this point are on the U.S. Senate race as maybe the biggest surprise.
That's tightening. It's tightened.
It's tight, and the surprise is because of Casey's name. It wouldn't be necessarily surprising for a Republican to win. Obviously, we have Pat Toomey already in the U.S. Senate, and we've had a lot of Republican U.S. senators, regardless of the presidency or other factors. But I do think beating a Bob Casey, would be a big story for Tom Smith. And as Republican U.S. Senate candidates around the country have shot themselves in the foot with stupid remarks, for lack of a better way to phrase it,
talking
Smith
about
looks better and better.
And Todd Aiken,
Indiana,
and now we have Indiana. Yeah.
So Smith looks better and better, and I mean I think that's. You can see money flowing this way, both to defend Bob Casey and to help Smith.
But your bottom line is you think that's going to be a pretty close election.
I think that one's a close election, sort of a too close to call at this point in time. And of course, now we have this storm making its way up the coast. So who knows? Are we going to have floods and snow and for Halloween and the days into the election and people cleaning up trees instead or without power? I mean, depending on.
I just want to ask you one question about the presidential election, and then we'll get into your poll. We were frequented 40 times in 2008 by the 4 candidates, 2 for vice president. They spent $29 million in our state on ads. Again, 2 campaigns. Now, I guess they're going to put some commercials up in the western part of the state, right? As I understand
That's the last we've all heard, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And no candidates, 2 here. Romney in the east and Ryan in the west. Is Pennsylvania any longer a battleground state? I get asked that all the time. You study this a lot. I'm asking you.
Well, apparently this cycle, this time, it doesn't appear that way. But you know the history better than anyone. That if you look over the course of the 20th century, Pennsylvania was a red state for the first third of the century and all of the 19th century, from the time the Republican Party was born. Right. and then really flip-flop back and forth. So yes, we've not gone for the Republican presidential candidate since '88, but I think just the fact that I think we're the classic purple state. I mean, given that we may vote Democrat for president, and in the same year vote Republican for U.S. Senate.
Yeah. And, so I like to put it this way: we're not New Jersey, and we're not Ohio. We're somewhere. Would you agree? We're somewhere stuck.
Somewhere in between.
All right, let's talk about this education poll. I think the headline, there are a bunch of headlines out of it, but one would be that literally we have these core standards and there's not a lot of knowledge about them, right?
Right, and that's where we went into this is even through the recession, Pennsylvania employers couldn't find well-educated, well-trained workers, whether it be at the some kind of level of education less than a 4-year degree or even at the 4-year degree. But frankly, we have more of a problem between high school and a 4-year degree. You know, people with whether it be a certificate in a particular skill area or a 2-year associate's degree. And part of the reason is that frankly, the product coming out of our public school systems, the K through 12 education, isn't career and college ready. And that's been the case for a number of years. This is not something brand new. But what we wanted to do was say, look, across the country, governors came together with their secretaries of education back in 2007, launched in 2010 something called the Common Core Standards. Is Pennsylvania ready for it? Are voters knowledgeable about it? When they do hear about it, what will they say to policymakers? Let's help with that dialogue and with that conversation, help policymakers to understand, help school boards, parents to understand. And so we wanted to get a baseline, and hence the poll.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk with you a little more specifically about the Common Core Standards. What are they, and why you think voters, not just voters, but all citizens ought to be concerned. Yeah, ought to care. All right, we'll be back. We're going to pay some bills, and then we'll be back on the other side of a break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back. I'm talking with Dave Patti from the Pennsylvania Business Council. They conducted a poll. The Terrence Group, actually, a national polling company, did a survey of some education issues. We're talking about that. You know, one of the things that comes up is this Common Core. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? What's your sense about what voters think about that?
The bad news out of our poll was that voters feel like education in Pennsylvania is getting worse. 43% said that they think education is worse than it was 10 years ago. And they particularly are concerned the way we compare, not only to other states, but the way we compare to other countries. They think Pennsylvania is probably about the same as other states, but they think all of our states don't fare well compared to the global economy, and then they recognize that. The other thing that they recognize is, and you know this from college campuses, the vast amount of time and money that's going into remediation. Young people who have to retake what they should have learned in math and language arts before they're ready for college courses. So the Common Core was literally governors and, as I said before, their education secretaries coming together to say, okay, we're not going to make adequate yearly progress that was required under No Child Left Behind. What are we going to do? So let's use that laboratories of democracy thing. Let's all work on a common basis, but not an identical basis. No federal government top-down telling us what to do, but let's go forward together and let's have more rigorous standards, starting with math, starting with language arts. Let's make young people read more technical material, more difficult material, a move away from fiction to nonfiction, particularly by high school, so that they're ready for college-level textbooks, manuals.
We had the chancellor of the state system on here just recently, and he was making the point of how the public universities in particular, going up to places like Mansfield and you know where the Marcellus Shale is, to put more of an emphasis on technical education, you know, pre-engineering, but more preparing people as they come out of high school for work in these new growing industries. In other words, sort of matching skills. Now, he was talking about at the collegiate level, collegiate, the job.
Right.
Go ahead.
I think there's, everybody in education likes to talk about the lifelong learner. Then they create their own little silos. Yes, but I'm academic. Well, I'm vocational. Well, I'm, 2-year. It's a continuum. And for the employer, in fact, what we need the families to understand is that employers will take a talented young person who has some skills. If they have a 2-year degree or certificate and they start and do well, the employer will often help pay for the bachelor's degree to move into management, the master's degree to move further into management. So there's an ability to transcend those different silos and categories.
That's one of the points about this sort of seamless transition that I know that it's tough to accomplish in a state where you have sort of an independent community college system and an independent public university system, and how you get that. Plus the technical schools,
and
we're doing better with that, I think.
The governor has a post-secondary ed commission working right now. So that's separate from this effort that we're working on, but we were involved in that as well. And to some degree, there is an attempt within that commission to reconcile some of those issues in addition to the funding. But what Common Core means is that if all students across the country are held to a higher standard, and we have that accountability for parents and for taxpayers, what that allows us to do, and with common state assessments, Keystone exams to start in Pennsylvania, maybe eventually moving into a common state assessment shared with other states. If we move forward together with those more rigorous standards, the young people are prepared for all of those options. That it doesn't have to be college or this. Yeah. And we know that they can embrace those new careers that are emerging in energy and other places.
Pushing that a little further, I mean, how much of the work, I mean, look, you represent the business community. How much do you hear that businesses are trying to find people, but they don't have the skills?
Even through the recession, the jobs went wanting.
In other words, they're jobs, but they're in fields for which the graduates, whether we're talking about high school or college, don't have enough science, don't have enough technology, or at least. Go ahead.
Certainly the hand skills. So the things that you can think of, like for technicians and welders and mechanics and plumbers and electricians.
But these are important. These are important to the economy.
Often they're linchpins for other jobs. A large steel firm here in central Pennsylvania a couple of years ago had the orders to expand capacity, couldn't find the industrial electricians. With those, and they would have hired all the laborers. Sikorsky Helicopters in Coatesville, Pennsylvania. They make these luxury helicopters that are basically Winnebagos with rotors. So they need cabinet makers, they need electricians, they need painters. But at the end of the day, they also need avionics people. Can't get enough of them. And of course, with that comes the marketing people, the sales people, the managers, the accountants, all those other jobs.
And
so we get these
we got about
critical skills.
35 seconds left. And you think if we could do more of this matching, that it would be a significant boost to the state's economy? Do you think that's the heart of the problem?
If we have young people who can read, write, work in a team environment, know to show up for work every day, don't have a drug problem, yes. I mean, the economy grows, the state grows, state revenues grow.
All right. Thanks for the update. We'll see you soon. All right, thanks for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.